What's up everyone? Today we're talking about infantry kits. I made this video to help new and some intermediate players understand the basics of what each infantry kit does, their responsibilities, and how they sort of fit in with an infantry squad. But first, if you like content like this and you want some more guides for a squad, be sure to hit the subscribe button, leave a like, drop a comment down below with your thoughts on this video, and let's get to it. So we're going to be going over different aspects of the kits, specifically around roles or responsibilities for that kit. We'll also be looking at each kit in terms of it being more of an assault or support type of role. Where does it fit in with the squad? And we'll be going over each kit in terms of whether they are preferred for fire team roles or to be on emplacements or turrets. All this along with some helpful ideas or expectations for each kit to get you better prepared. So now let's start breaking down the kits. First, let's talk about the Rifleman. Probably the least sexy kit in the group, but one of the most beneficial. It's an anti-infantry focus kit, and it carries a portable ammo supply. This kit is often underrated, but the portable ammo supply is huge at keeping your squad and infantry around you rearmed, especially if you're able to keep your own ammo bag resupplied. This can be super valuable when you're an infantry squad working off rally or on the attack. This is a type of kit that can fit both in assault and support roles. It's a pretty versatile kit, and it's ideal to have at least one, maybe two, or more riflemen per squad. Because of their kits and optics and their ability to play assault sort of on the front line, they are ideal for a fire team lead. This kit should also be prioritized for any turrets or emplacements that need to be manned over other kits and roles in the squad. While being anti-infantry focused, you also have to keep in mind that your ability to resupply members of your squad and fire team is pivotal. You should prioritize AT, medics, or SL for resupply. This could be somewhat situational. If there's a vehicle nearby that's causing a lot of problems, you may need to prioritize AT over resupplying a different kit. Otherwise, your mission really needs to be to keep your infantry that's around you on the front line versus having to backtrack to go to ammo boxes or other resupply points. And finally, you need to try to be aware of how much ammo you have in your bag and resupply as often as possible. Next up, we have medics. Medics are the only role or kit in the game that are able to heal and revive other players. That alone should say enough about their value, especially when working in infantry squads. Really good medics can do a lot to affect the outcome of a game. And with that said, it is a kit that leans more towards support, and it's ideal to have one, maybe two medics depending on the squad's tasking. And this is not a kit that should be on any turrets or emplacements. And for fire team lead, this is not a preferred kit because typically if they're healing or doing revives, that puts them towards the back of the group. And really keeping the infantry around you, the friendly infantry at least, alive and healthy is important. That's going to help with things like stability when it comes to aiming. It could also reduce ticket loss. But again, that may slow down their pace a little bit, putting them a little bit further back in the group. But realistically, medics need to be aware of a couple of things. They need to communicate and give awareness to those that they are picking up off the ground. If you have some intel that you can share with someone that you are reviving, that can be helpful at helping them get out of the situation that they're in. So give that guidance as best you can. Additionally, heal yourself before you try to heal others, and maybe more importantly, secure the area around you before trying to revive and heal. Just within that immediate area, if you know that there are enemies nearby, it may be beneficial to try to kill them before you go in for the heal, because having a bandage out when you're getting pushed is not exactly ideal. Next, we're going to talk about light anti-tank or LAT kits, which should be focused on defending infantry from vehicles with a prioritization on immobilizing heavy vehicles. If you're able to immobilize a tank or an IFV so that a hat kit or a friendly vehicle can come up and support, that's pretty helpful, and that's ideal for a LAT. It's going to be a little bit harder for you to kill every vehicle on the field. I mean, light vehicles are one thing, so are transports or lodges, but when it comes to heavier vehicles, just immobilize and keep them away from your infantry. This is a kit that's going to lean assault, but can also fit support teams. And it's ideal to have at least one LAT per squad, sometimes two, but that may depend on tasking for that squad. And this is also not a kit I'm going to prioritize to have on any turrets or emplacements because of how valuable they can be when moving towards enemy vehicles. But because they may be tracking an enemy vehicle, this is a preferred kit for fire team leader. And because they need ranging from the SL, it kind of helps in two different areas. You can get the ranging and the marks down pretty quickly and efficiently. While LATs may be focused on immobilizing heavier vehicles, maybe destruction of smaller vehicles, whatever it is, they need to be understanding of the situation that they're in. This means having trigger discipline and understanding whether disabling a vehicle or not is going to benefit or hurt the infantry squad you might be in. For example, tracking a BMP across the street from where your infantry squad needs to go to may not be super beneficial for that infantry squad, whereas letting it pass could be beneficial and then maybe saving that rocket for something else that comes along. And finally, it's important for LATs not to chase ghosts. Don't chase every sound that you hear and assume that you need to go kill that vehicle. The importance of a LAT with infantry is significant. Not only can Rifleman rearm you for that next rocket that you can put on a light vehicle that may be harassing the infantry, but it allows you to at least maybe push some of the other IFVs and things away. Which brings us to the heavy anti-tank role, which should be focused on destroying enemy vehicles. The heavy anti-tank role has a little bit more firepower, giving it the ability to potentially kill or heavily damage things like tanks or IFVs. So while a LAT can immobilize, the HAT may be able to finish, and this is where having ammo resupply nearby comes in handy. A HAT kit is a fully an assault role, and having a HAT is based on squad tasking. If you're just playing the defensive, it may not be as ideal for you to have a HAT kit as someone on the assault in the attack or forward position. But because of that and the fact that they have binoculars, I would prefer this kit for a fireteam leader. However, I would not prioritize them for turrets or emplacements similar to how we have the LAT set up. It's just more ideal for them to have their rocket out ready to go. The HAT kit doesn't always come with a great range of optics, typically placing them in a beneficial position when playing in sort of CQB situations for anti-infantry. They are also able to deal heavier blows to vehicles around them, whether it's a light vehicle or something heavy duty like an IFV or a tank. They just can do more there to ward off a vehicle. But again, I give the same sort of warning I give to LATs. Don't chase every ghost or every vehicle you hear, because to some extent your role should still be protecting the infantry around, unless you're operating as more of a scout team. Maybe you have one of those situations where you've posted up on a road and your intention is to slow down enemy vehicles. That may have you play differently than you would if you were just moving with an infantry squad. But again, it may be dependent on the situation or the tasking that you are set with by your SL. Now let's talk about the Grenadier kit, which is a rifleman with added firepower being the grenade launcher. It's a very versatile kit for infantry squads, both in an attack or in a more defensive position. So the kit itself may lean assault, but it can easily fit in more of a supportive position based on the situation. It's not really a required kit for your infantry, but it's typically an ideal kit to have because of the boost in firepower. Now, while it may lean towards an assault role, we realize that the GL also comes with smokes, which gives it that support capability. So not only are you able to send a GL into a room to clear it, you can also send smoke to cover in advance. And a really good GL can make these determinations very quickly and help infantry within a 200 to 300 meter radius around you, depending on the environment, which makes this another preferred kit for fireteam lead. There's sort of flexibility and versatility while also potentially needing ranging from the SL. And this is another kit that I would possibly put on a turret or emplacement depending on the situation. The Grenadier just has great capability at sort of offsetting situations. They can launch an HE round into a room and potentially clear it, or they can smoke the window so that your infantry can advance and clear the space. So a Grenadier needs to be able to provide good fire support for your squad. They should also be familiar with basic ranging. The Grenadier can be super effective at just disrupting, disorienting, and creating a lot of chaos. So use that grenade launcher when possible. Now let's talk about the automatic Rifleman. This is an anti-infantry focused kit. It's going to boost the firepower and suppression ability of an infantry squad. But depending on the user and the specific weaponry, it could be less mobile of a kit, which is why the auto rifleman is going to lean more towards support. This isn't necessarily a required kit for any infantry squad, but it can give you a bump in firepower and the ability to suppress enemies, so it might be ideal for defensive squads. But this is typically not a preferred kit for a fireteam leader, which is typically just because of the pace that that person may need to operate at to be effective. This is also not a kit I'm going to prioritize for emplacements or turrets. If we're in a vehicle, I want these guys out quickly and I want them finding a position where they have some sort of oversight over an area or just have the ability to quickly get in position to start laying suppressive fire if necessary. Now, ultimately, the auto rifleman may be more mobile than the machine gunner depending on weaponry or just the user's comfort with being more mobile. Ultimately, if your squad is able to work with someone who is proficient with the AR and you're able to get them in some good positions, they can really add to the firepower of your squad. It's likely that the weaponry and the user's comfort with the weaponry will typically dictate how aggressive they can be or how mobile they can be with the kit. But regardless, it can always fit into a support role if necessary, especially in a defensive posture. We also have the machine gunner, which is going to offer the same sort of stuff. It can be helpful for defensive squads to have machine gunner, and it's going to boost firepower and suppression ability. This kit is typically going to be less mobile than an AR kit. Instead, this kit's going to excel when they have the opportunity to bipod up and set up and begin to fire. Similar to AR, this is a kit that's going to rely more so on defensive positioning and setting up with like overwatch positions, or something to cover friendly infantry and apply suppression to enemy targets. Therefore, this kit leans fully towards a support role. It may not be required for a squad, but it can give an infantry squad a boost, especially when on the defensive. And because of their positioning and lack of mobility, this is not a preferred kit for a fireteam lead. And similar to AR, this is another kit that I want out of a vehicle away from emplacements and setting up on their own. They have their own capability to provide suppression, and that's more ideal to have out there versus sitting on an emplacement. The MG's positioning is key, so understanding how to get into that position to be most effective based on what you have is important, because MG kits will tend to have less flexibility and mobility than AR kits. But the MG has the ability to get bipoded up and start firing to suppress enemies and degrade their ability to do a lot of things. We should discuss Combat Engineer, a very flexible kit with a ton of utility. Not only do you have the fastest shovel in the game for building or destroying any sort of emplacements, but you also, depending on the faction and of course the kit itself, may have mines or C4. There's plenty the Combat Engineer can do, including doing basic fixes on vehicles with their repair kit. Now, I'm going to say that the Combat Engineer kit typically leans towards support. It may not be a required kit for every squad, but it can be a very useful one depending on tasking. Now, if you just look at positioning, having it lean towards support may be a little bit misleading, because oftentimes you find Combat Engineers in CQB situations or playing more forward. But it also operates in a situation where it could be playing area denial by using their mines on certain roads or pathways to slow down enemy vehicles. They could be placing C4 on enemy Vics that you've already disabled, or in the back repairing a friendly Vic. Simultaneously, they could be up front on their own searching for an enemy radio up ahead of your assault team, or maybe working off of a flank. And because typically their position may be outside of what the rest of your infantry group may be doing, I typically do not prefer them for an FTL role. But that could be based on the situation or the tasking. There are times where you're operating more as a scout squad, and it can be ideal to have the Combat Engineer available as the FTL to mark whatever the enemy has in the area that he's scouting. Simultaneously, it can be relatively easy to mark whatever the Combat Engineer is near that he sees or that he's working against. For example, if he's digging down a radio, his position is the radio mark that the FTL elsewhere needs to make. And because of all their utility and the need to sort of be on foot doing whatever they do best, this is not a kit that I would prioritize for emplacements or turrets. Due to the range of utility, the Combat Engineer just has a lot of flexibility in how they can play. The role itself is often seen as that one that has to be hunting radios. But if I'm running a squad, I want my Combat Engineer to be working within the same area of operation. I don't want them too distant from the squad or a fire team that we can't respond to help them if they do find that radio. And I think for fire team lead, again, it's situational, but it's also something that may come down to the comfort you have with the person running that kit. Ideally, you can find opportunities to include Combat Engineers into your squad because they do give you a bunch of utility, but I do think it is a more advanced kit to be used, and it's something that has a ton of capability if used correctly. Now let's talk about the Marksman role. This is a kit that is much more situational in terms of its effectiveness. Its longer range optics can be ideal in certain situations, potentially more on the defensive front than the attacking side. I would add that while this kit gets memed on a lot because it typically places people outside of an area that an SL might want to be working within because of its optics and how it needs to be utilized, there are some beneficial ways to use the Marksman kit. But the kit itself leans fully towards a support role, primarily due to optics and the need for range. Similar to a machine gunner, you may be operating at a slightly slower pace, again because of optics and the way that a marksman should be played. Now, stylistically, you may have folks that are fine in some CQB situations to some extent, but most of the time that's not the case. My preference is typically not to make a marksman FTL unless it's situational. If the squad is operating more on the defensive or sort of as a scout team and they have a decent vantage point and can make good callouts, then I'll make that marksman an FTL because they do have an advantage there. And similar to Combat Engineer, that may be reliant on the familiarity you have with the person operating the kit and their ability to make callouts. If you're unable to make those callouts, then it seems to be pointless to have this kit. I'd rather have another Rifleman in my squad. And its overall capability or utility is pretty narrow. This is also why I'd probably put a marksman on a turret or emplacement if necessary, similar to how I would if we had a rifleman in the squad. Otherwise, I'm going to be pushing them to find their position, similar to how I would expect an MG or an AR to find some position that makes them more useful. Now, largely taking marksmen is frowned upon because they typically find themselves way too far away from their squad or anywhere useful. That's largely because of how they have to play with their longer range capability. And if they can't make solid callouts, what's the point of having all of that? So if you are going to be a marksman, you need to consider what your squad's tasking is. If it's defensive, maybe there's an opportunity if you have enough map knowledge to position yourself well. And you can assist in making those callouts, maybe covering a flank or a specific pathway that enemies might be using, slowing them down, and allowing your squad to move in to help counter whatever the enemy is doing. That's where you can find value in having a marksman, but it's just not always the case. Now, I realize with some factions you may have additional kits like a raider. Some of these kits are going to fit into the same sort of profile that we've already discussed with the main kits that are across every faction. So if you have a sniper, that may play similar to a marksman. If you have a raider kit, maybe that plays closer to a combat engineer. Where if you have some kit that has more anti-tank capability, that may be closer to a lat. It just depends on their utility and how it can fit in. I hope this video is especially helpful for new players that are looking to understand and get a better idea of what some of the kits and capabilities are. Especially when working as a squad, like what are the expectations of each of these kits and how they play together. This video was a little bit of a community effort, so shout out to all of those that I'll post down in the description below that submitted clips. Also, I need to give a shout out to somebody named Fox on Steam. They actually created a set of guides a while back that you can access, and I'll post the link in the description below, but these have been very helpful in trying to formulate a video around this. With all that said, again, be sure to hit the subscribe button, leave a like, drop a comment down below with your thoughts, or if you have anything to add to what I've already started to break down. And again, I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you next time.